car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Hello, you are watching The Attorneys. Glad to have you join us. I'm Art Franklin. And on this edition of The Attorneys, we're going to dive into your Fifth Amendment rights. That's right. But as we do that, I want to remind you that there's an attorney right now standing by at Hollis Wright who will take your call. It's a free and confidential call. Any question or comment you may want to make, you can call Hollis Wright right now at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK. Let's get over to the managing partner from Hollis Wright, to Josh Wright, and let's get into this topic, Josh.
This is a great topic. Relates to criminal law and Fifth Amendment privilege that is super important for people that find themselves interacting with the law. One of the things that I found most interesting that we're going to talk about and unwrap a bit today, Art, in the pre-production side of this show, was that the Fifth Amendment privilege may apply to certain things differently, like physical evidence, to testimony that you have to provide, to how you produce information. All of those things are impacted by the Fifth Amendment, and our guest, Jonathan Brown, is going to be with us today. JB, you go by, is going to be talking about this topic. First of all, kind of introduce yourself and your firm and tell us how you got into this area of the law and how you kind of became an expert in this area, because not every lawyer can do this. I don't have knowledge of the Fifth Amendment other than what I learned in constitutional law, right? But you're an expert in this area. So how'd you get involved in this? And just tell us a little bit about you.
So, like I said, my name's Jonathan Brown. I go by JB. I got into criminal law because I wanted to help people. I realized people make mistakes in life, and those mistakes don't define them. I was fortunate enough to end up at the firm I'm currently at, Jaffe Hanley Wisenant Knight. We're a 5-lawyer criminal defense firm in Birmingham. We go all over the state, municipal, state, federal court. If the police are trying to talk to you or you're worried that you may be charged with a crime, that's what we handle. As it relates to the constitutional law and getting into criminal law, I think it's one of the few areas where constitutional law kind of is our sword, that we are allowed to use that, and rightfully so, to protect our clients because they have their constitutional rights. Right. The Fifth Amendment is one of those that is, I would say, commonly misunderstood, but a lot of people have heard about it because they've heard, I plead the Fifth.
Yeah. What does it generally mean when someone says, I plead the Fifth? Let's unwrap that first and kind of explain it in as layman terms as we can so that the viewing audience understands kind of how this impacts criminal law.
Yeah, of course. So I plead the Fifth, and asserting your Fifth Amendment right is technically it is when the government or the state is compelling you to testify and you believe that you may give some information that might incriminate yourself or lead to incriminating information. That same principle applies when it's a police interrogation or things like that. You're not being compelled by a court at that point in time by the government, but it's the same idea that gives you the right to say, no, I don't want to talk to you. It's no different than people's Second Amendment right or your First Amendment right, which is why it's interesting to us that some people have that bad taste in their mouth when it comes to pleading the Fifth, thinking you're automatically guilty.
When you talk about pleading the Fifth, are there limitations or risks involved in invoking the Fifth Amendment?
I would say there's not really any risk. And the reason for that is if, let's say, you tell a detective, no, I'm not talking to you. That's fine. They can't continue questioning you. If you invoke your Fifth Amendment and say, I want a lawyer, they have to end questioning then. Where issues and things can get interesting is if you are being called as a witness in a different person's case. In that case, and we've recently handled that in federal court about a year ago, that the case law is if the government is trying to call someone as a witness in a criminal case and the judge is assured or believes that this person is reasonably pleading the Fifth, that they have a good faith belief they may incriminate themselves, then that person can't be called as a witness. It is not evidence against you, so that there's no negative inference in criminal law. Nothing bad can happen to you other than the common misconception that police are going to think, oh, you're guilty because you're refusing to talk to us, which just is not correct.
So the difference is between talking to an officer doing an arrest or a possible arrest and being in court.
Yes, there's a major difference in that, and that is something that the officer is going to end it right then and there. Yeah. In court, it's something that you're going to need a lawyer to argue about. Now, if you're the one charged with a crime everyone knows they can't make you testify. No one ever tries that. That is as easy as it gets. No one's going to bother doing that. Mm-hmm. It's more of if you are a witness in a case, and that comes up in federal cases, conspiracy cases, cases involving businesses. So
we see this actually a lot when we have a dram shop case, alcohol-related case with a drunk driver that causes injury to another, and the two cases, the civil case and the criminal case, are on different but consistent tracks with each other. And oftentimes we're not allowed to get to take the deposition of the individual who is under criminal prosecution throughout the case, and we've got to wait to do that to a later date. Is that common, the crossover between civil and criminal Fifth Amendment privileges?
Yes, it's very common, and I'm sorry that it's our fault that happens to you, that you have to wait, because we regularly do that for clients. And the reason why is you cannot make them sit and be deposed because they may say something that would incriminate themselves. Yeah. And the criminal charges don't have to be pending at that time for that person to assert that. It could just be, it's reasonable to believe, and for that person to hold that belief that something they say, a question they answer, may even lead to incriminating information.
And I was going to ask you a follow-up. If an individual is trying to invoke their Fifth Amendment privilege, either in a civil setting or a criminal setting, they don't have to have a pending charge against them if they reasonably believe that they could be criminally charged for a crime in the future. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. You don't need to say, oh, here's my case number, I'm charged here, that's why. Yeah. Absolutely not.
I've argued to more judges across the state than I can shake a stick at, tried to work my way around this issue of, well, hold on now, that guy's not being criminally prosecuted. This is super important to my clients too who are victims. And the law is what the law is. And so, we're creative as lawyers, but ultimately they've got that privilege. But, one of the things I find, Art, in my cases, and I'm sure JB's seen this too, is the courts are really good and the judges are good about allowing us to get all the other evidence that we need to, as long as it doesn't require that criminal defendant in a civil context to incriminate themselves under oath or to sign interrogatories. For example, there are circumstances where I can go get cell records from a hospital that may have their blood alcohol concentration, credit card receipts from them where they're not swearing under oath to something, and then I can go get information from the bar, for example, in a case, even though the Fifth Amendment privilege may be applicable.
That's what's so important about the firm, being able to do things like that. I'm just wondering how Miranda rights are related to the Fifth Amendment.
Great question.
I would say Miranda rights are making sure somebody is informed that they have a Fifth Amendment and that they have a right to have a lawyer present when they're being questioned. If an individual then answers questions, they're waiving their Fifth Amendment right. And a lot of law enforcement officers, rightfully so, there's a form and they have the person sign it so that lawyers can't then later on argue that their client was not read those Miranda rights. It incorporates the Fifth Amendment along with your right to have counsel. So they are very much interrelated.
When we come back, I'm going to tease the break with this. When we come back, I want to talk about whether or not the passcode on your phone, which is sacred to a lot of people, if that is protected and whether you have to give that up to a police officer. We're going to talk about that because it is implicated in Fifth Amendment privilege.
That is a tease.
Yeah. That's right.
If I've ever heard a good, that is a good tease.
Well, you may find there may not be a lot of case law on this, but that there's a general understanding of it.
That's Josh for you. Good tease. So he's got you hanging on your seats, right? While you're hanging on your seats, if you got a question you want to ask a lawyer from Hollis, Wright, go ahead and do that. Pick up the phone and dial 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free call. It's confidential, and someone will get that call for you. We're going to leave you hanging for just a few, but we'll be back as we continue talking about Fifth Amendment. We'll unpack it for you next here on The Attorneys.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
The firm's motto is "Your result matters," and we mean that sincerely. Hollis Wright handles cases every day for those at their lowest point, and will do whatever it takes to get the result you deserve. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys. I want to remind you that throughout the show, you will see information on your screen on the topic that we are discussing, just to give you more information about the things that may be important to you, the legal matters that matter to you. We make sure that you have that. I want to remind you also to follow Hollis Wright on all the social media platforms, on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, which used to be known as Twitter. Make sure you follow, share, and like. We want to give you some good information there. You can do that all week long. We're back now as we're talking about understanding your Fifth Amendment. That's a big deal, and it's a topic that I think sometimes gets confused.
Well, and there is some confusion out there. There are certain things clearly that are not protected by the Fifth Amendment privilege, like the right to be pictured by the police if you're being arrested, like the responsibility you have to provide fingerprints, those types of things. But one of the things I want to talk about that is kind of a newer area of the law is passcodes on phones, and whether you have a responsibility if an officer is asking, a detective is asking for you to unlock your phone to give them access to it, or in a criminal prosecution, whether you have a duty to provide that information. It's a fascinating area of the law, and I just thought we'd ask it.
It absolutely is, and I think you know this. The law is very far behind technology, right? There's years catching up to it. The way we view that, and many lawyers and many courts, the Supreme Court has not ruled on this issue, but if a cop asks you for your phone password, that's no different than saying, hey, where were you at this time, right? They're asking for a testimonial, they're asking for you to provide them with something. Therefore, I would very surely say that the Fifth Amendment applies. You don't have to give that to them. If it relates to biometric data, and that's the new thing that's kind of coming out, is can the police get a search warrant or demand you put your thumbprint on your phone to unlock it? Can they put it up to your face to unlock it? I think it's a dangerous area because I see the logic behind that's no different than having your picture taken. Yeah. That you're not actually providing anything. It's just you as you are. When you said yourself, you're allowed to give fingerprints, they're allowed to take pictures. Well, biometric data really is no different. Right. Now, that begs the question, hey, don't have your phone where you can unlock it with your face. Right. I'll be honest, mine I can unlock with my face. Right. Maybe I shouldn't, maybe, that's a question for another day, but I think it goes to the ultimate issue really. If the police ever ask something of somebody, whether you did something wrong or not, that the smart, wise thing to do is to not answer their questions.
Yeah. An issue that we have seen before in some of our cases relates to whether or not corporations or entities have a Fifth Amendment privilege no different than the three of us do. Can you unwrap that a little bit?
So it is a hard issue, and I disagree with it personally with what I do for a living. We regularly represent pharmacists, doctors, things like that, other businesses. If there is a subpoena issued to that business, the business itself is an entity, it's not an individual, therefore they don't have the Fifth Amendment protections that a person does. Meaning that the owner of that business is forced to then comply with that subpoena and turn over those records that may be incriminating. Yeah. Where, the law gets very interesting, and where, I think the lawyers really come into play with things is the act of somebody not associated with the company turning those records over, is that act itself therefore incriminating, and can you assert a Fifth Amendment with that? Yeah. And that is an issue that the federal courts are still dealing with, the circuit splits and things like that. But as far as the business records themselves, no, I say unfortunately, but no, those records are not that individual, so therefore they have to be complied with, which means you have to turn over sometimes information that's incriminating.
Yeah. I was thinking about the issue of double jeopardy and how Fifth Amendment is related to that. Does it give you any type of protection in that area?
Absolutely. So the Fifth Amendment is much more than just the right to remain silent. It also is for any serious offenses, which we consider felony offenses, and must be presented to a grand jury and be indicted. Double jeopardy is that you cannot be tried for the same conduct and have your freedom at risk 2 times, right, for the same thing. That is why if there is a not guilty verdict, the state does not, or the government does not get to appeal that verdict. Where if a defendant is found guilty, they get to appeal it. That's part of the rationale with all that. So it absolutely does. It also means that they can't continue to just charge the same conduct but a different way over and over and over and over again. Yeah. So it's one of the really bedrocks of our freedoms, because that's really what it is.
Why we kind of glossed over this early on because we got right into the topic, but why would someone claim a Fifth Amendment privilege not to speak with an officer? I mean, we hear this, and you really did a good job of explaining how Miranda is intertwined with the Fifth Amendment privilege. People see television all the time where there are police implications in those television shows where someone has read their rights, and they know that if they didn't get their rights read, they may be able to have charges dismissed, all those things. But why would someone not want to talk with an officer and provide information to the officer? I want to kind of talk a little bit about that.
It's a question that I regularly get from individuals, and there's a lot of reasons. I would say, 3 top reasons are, the first one is you have no idea what they may be asking you about. Absolutely no idea. Therefore, you're walking in or being questioned about something that it may have been 5 or 10 years ago, and you remember doing, but it slipped your mind. The main reason, and I think it's the easiest one to understand, is if someone asked you, 2 weeks ago, Tuesday, what order did you do things that day? Well, that's a very hard question to answer. Yeah. You're not trying to lie. If someone asked me 2 weeks ago, what did I do? I picked up my kids, went to work, went to court. Well, maybe I did something a little bit different that day. Yeah. Well, if you give that statement to the police, you're not intentionally lying. However, then in their eyes, and it can be used in court against you, you are now a liar. Mm-hmm. Right? And prosecutors, just like they're good at cross-examining and make a big deal out of little things, then you become a liar. Yeah. You don't need that. And it's not a matter of, hey, I'm intentionally lying, I'm trying to be evasive.
Right.
The other reason is a lot of times when police want to talk to people, they have their mind made up, is the reality. Mm-hmm. If you're not a witness to something and there's an investigation, they're just trying to put a nice bow on the case. Yeah. And have a confession. As a criminal defense attorney, one of the worst things is, talking to a client, prosecutor, getting discovery, and they go, oh, well, your client confessed to everything. Mm-hmm. That doesn't give us a whole lot to work with.
Yeah. When we come back, because I know we're getting ready to go to break, Art, I want to talk about how the Fifth Amendment privilege is involved in court proceedings and whether defendants have the right to waive their Fifth Amendment privilege to testify in court. We have some pretty famous cases that have happened recently in our state and in the country, and I want to talk a little bit about that.
All right. As we head to break, I want to give you another reminder about that QR code you see on your screen. Go ahead and scan that. That QR code will take you to Hollis Wright, just like this number, 1-844-LAW-TALK, 1-844-LAW-TALK. Someone standing by right now to take your call. It's a free confidential call. So we're talking Fifth Amendment on the attorneys. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
Hollis Wright handles cases every day where a drunk driver causes an accident and injures someone. If you've been a victim of a drunk driving accident, give us a call for a free consultation. And remember, at Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. I want to remind you to follow Hollis Wright on all social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And we're giving you useful information all the time. We also have that QR code on the screen. That QR code will give you information by adding you to our mailing list, and we can get information to you that way as well. We like to give you good resources, legal matters that matter to you, of course, matter to us. And right now what matters is the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, and let's talk just for a little bit about how this, and you talked about it in the first segment, but how does this apply while you're in court? Because, you know, a lot of times people are watching, you know, court TV and they're like, I want this defendant, I want to hear from his perspective. Did he do this? Did he not do this? But the Fifth Amendment impacts and protects and insulates those individuals even while they're in court, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it gets back to one of the reasons that there is the Fifth Amendment, that the state and the government has an immense amount of power and resources. That is why you hear the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It is on the state and government at all times. It's not on the defense. And that is why a defendant has their Fifth Amendment right to choose to testify or to not testify. Now, as a criminal defense lawyer, that is one of the few things that is completely up to the client. Obviously, to plead guilty or go to trial is 100% their decision. Whether they want to testify or not, that is completely up to them. We can advise our clients one way, and they can decide they want to no or yes. Yeah. Wholeheartedly their choice. The judges, and at the end of a case, there's jury instructions. Instruct the jury, you know, you can give no weight to whether or not the defendant testified and all of that. I agree with you, common sense does beg the question, and jurors are human beings. I know a lot of trial scientists and juror consultants and all that. It is an issue that people want to know, well, hey, if you really didn't do this, I want to hear you say it. Yeah. As criminal defense attorneys, that's a dangerous game. It's called burden shifting. The burden stays on them. It's not on an individual to prove a negative, essentially. To prove you didn't do something can be pretty hard, right? So that is that protection. I think that there are certain cases more than others where there is that issue of a jury wanting to hear. Is the jury legally allowed to take that into account? No, they're not. And I believe in our system, and I believe that jurors do follow the judge's instructions to not do that.
Yeah. And you get to argue that in closing argument too, or really in jury selection. You get to argue also, you know, that are you going to hold it against my client if he does or does not testify because he has a right not to testify?
Absolutely. That is a big part of our voir dire and criminal defense cases is making sure we deselect, but that jurors understand the importance of the Constitution and that they understand that and to not hold it against somebody. And essentially everything we've spoken about today, why someone would choose not to talk. It's not because they're guilty, it's because it's their right to. No one questions people, why are you exercising your First Amendment? Well, because you can.
Right. You know, JB, we were talking about the confusion of the Fifth Amendment sometimes from people. What are some of those common misconceptions about the Fifth Amendment?
I would say one is why would I not talk to the police if I didn't do anything? And I think we hit on that one. That's a major one. The other one that I get a lot is, well, it's going to look really bad. They're investigating me. They're going to absolutely think I'm guilty, and now they're going to charge me with a crime. Well, that's just not true. Investigators are police officers, and they understand why lawyers advise people not to talk for all the reasons we've spoken about today. That is not a piece of evidence in their case, and they know that. So there's not an extra, it's not a weighing factor. What they're looking for is, hey, can I establish one element I may have trouble with? You know, there may not be any good evidence that this person is in that location. And if somebody talks and they say, well, I was there, but I didn't do it, well, now they've knocked out one of the things they have to prove. So that's what I tell people all the time is it's not worth it. No one's ever, that I've heard of, talked themselves out of trouble. If a cop they've done their investigation and they want to charge you with a crime, they're going to charge you with the crime. You're not talking yourself out of it. So don't bother. You can make a situation worse.
What are some things that are not protected by the Fifth Amendment? I know we unwrapped a little bit about fingerprints, photos. Are there some other things that are not protected by the Fifth Amendment?
I would say if anytime the police ask you to do anything, the answer should be, in my opinion as a criminal defense attorney, no. And it goes towards, can I search your car? No, you don't have my consent to search my car. If police get a search warrant or something like that, well, that's a different story. You obviously comply with anything law enforcement has court orders to do. If they're asking you for something, there's no reason to be rude or anything like that. The answer can just be no. No, I'm going to call my lawyer. I'm going to get a lawyer. Fingerprints, they can ask if you're driving for your ID, things like that. That's fine. If you get booked, they'll ask for some personal information. But nothing, if you ever feel like something you're going to say could incriminate you, don't say it. Yeah. I mean, it's really as simple as that. Don't say it and call a lawyer.
We've been talking about how important it is to get in contact with a lawyer like you, JB, or someone at Hollis, Wright even. What kind of protection, I guess, do you have in a situation with how the lawyer actually ensures that the Fifth Amendment rights are being protected?
Just about all law enforcement prosecutors, everybody knows, everybody working in, I'll call it the system, understands once somebody is represented, you cannot try to talk to that defendant, that individual. And that is why when we get hired on a case, any criminal defense lawyer, if you reach out to the investigator, hey, call me, I'm representing them. And that's really how, that you don't then risk that issue of continued contact, anything like that of somebody. Because I get it. If someone was accusing me of something I didn't do, I'd want to explain that I didn't do it. That's human nature. And sometimes it's hard to fight back against human nature, and that's where, a lawyer comes into play with all of that. It is also easier for people when it's the lawyer saying, hey, they're taking my advice, I'm telling them not to do this, to kind of put the blame on us rather than the person. So, there's a lot of reasons that I would say having a lawyer involved is extremely helpful. And I'm not going to say that it's necessarily fair that somebody has to get a lawyer at that early, but it is just the nature of it.
If you're going to waive your Fifth Amendment privilege, they generally require you to sign something?
Generally, yes.
Okay, gotcha. Something to note. Hey, look, great job, by the way. You did an awesome job. I'm glad you were on and unwrapped this topic. It's an important topic.
Indeed, JB, thank you again. And thank you guys for watching. Still want to remind you, though, to follow Hollis Wright on all the social media platforms, on X, on Instagram, and also on Facebook. And make sure you put it on your calendar. Join us again next week. We'll do this all over again, new topic, as we continue giving you useful information. Legal matters that matter to you, matter to us. Catch Hollis Wright next week. All right, so long, guys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.